And I'm thinking, you think you know what political power is. You don't have the faintest idea it is.
This is the city that Robert Moses built. New York and the area around it was a very different place before Robert Moses arrived. Over a period of 50 years, from the days of Al Smith through the years of Nelson Rockefeller, as head of city, state, and county commissions and authorities, Robert Moses changed the face of New York. It was Robert Moses who built the Throgs Neck Bridge, and the Bronx Whitestone, and the Verrazano, and the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. It was Robert Moses who built Jones Beach, virtually the entire Long Island Parkway system, the Henry Hudson Parkway, and the Cross Bronx and Bruckner Expressways. It was Robert Moses who cleared the land for Lincoln Center and the United Nations, who built Shea Stadium and the Second World's Fair and the Coliseum. It was Robert Moses who built Kennedy Airport and Co-op City and 600 playgrounds in New York. And when Robert Moses built bridges, he built the roads that led to them. When he built housing units, he built the parks around them. He gained a power unseen before, a power to build what he felt the city needed. He was afraid of no one. He battled the poor of the West Side and the rich of Long Island. And in the end, Robert Moses always won.
You think you're in a democracy and political power comes from being elected. Here's a guy who was never elected to anything, and he had more power than anyone who was, more power than any mayor, more power than any governor, more power than any mayor and governor combined, and he held his power for 44 years, and with it, he shaped all New York City.
It was a Puerto Rican slum.
The map of the Northern State Parkway on Long Island in Cold Spring Harbor is a map not only of a road, but of power. In the original planning phases, Robert Moses, chairman of the Parks Department and unelected king of New York, decided to build a path for the route of the Parkway, which cut through the newly minted 18-hole private golf course that Otto Kahn had built on his sprawling estate. Kahn convinced Moses to change the route by dropping a $10,000 bribe, aka donation, to the Parks Department for surveying costs incurred by moving it. South of Otto Kahn's estate lay the estates of two other men of wealth and with influence in the legislature, Congressman Ogden Livingston Mills and Colonel Henry Rogers Winthrop. The congressman and the colonel were able to get the route shifted further south, far enough to where it wouldn't touch their estates either. But shifting the route south of the Mills and Winthrop estates meant that it would run through the estates of two other men of wealth and power, Colonel Henry I. Stimson and Robert W. DeForest. So the route was shifted south again. And south of the Stimson and DeForest estate lay a row of farms, farmers had neither wealth nor influence. James Roth was one of those farmers. When he had purchased his 59 acres in 1922, much of it had been woodland and all of it rocky. He owned a team of horses, but they couldn't budge the stumps of the ancient forest. As the horses pulled at them, Roth pulled beside them, and so did his wife Helen. So that both would be free for pulling, their son Jimmy, at the age of 5, had to learn how to handle the team. As his parents twisted at the ropes, he sat on the horse, kicking them forward. After the farm was cleared, the Roths found that the southern 15 acres were no good for planting, but the rest of the land was rich and fertile. In the afternoons, during the harvest season, James Roth, who had been up since dawn working in the fields, would load up one of his 2 wagons and drive to market. While he was gone, his wife and son, who in 1927 was 6 years old, would load the other. When Roth returned, he would, without pause, since every minute was important to a farmer trying to work 34 acres without a hired man, unharness the team, hitch it to a loaded wagon, and begin the trip again, while Helen and Jimmy would reload the first wagon. But by 1927, the farm had begun paying. We felt pretty secure, Jimmy recalled. We had a nice farm, and in those days, a farm wasn't just real estate like it is now. In those days, a farm was your living. It was your home, and we had a nice farm. It was later that same year that a representative of the Long Island State Park Commission of Robert Moses drove up to the Roth's farm and told them that the state was condemning 14 acres out of the farm center for the Northern State Parkway. James Roth argued with Moses' representative. He pleaded with him. All he wanted the commission to do, Roth said, was to move the parkway route about 40 feet south, less than a tenth of a mile. That would put it in the barren part of the farm. Taking 14 acres from the center meant that a substantial part of the fertile acreage would be gone. Even more important, it meant that the farm would be sliced in 2. How would he get from one side to the other? How would he work it? But Moses' representative refused to listen to the Roths. The route had been decided on the basis of the engineering considerations, he said. It was science. It could not possibly be changed. Robert Moses had shifted the parkway south of his cousin Otto Kahn's estate, south of the Winthrop and Mills estates, south of Stimson and DeForest's estates. For a man of wealth and influence, he had moved it more than 3 miles south of its original location. But James Roth possessed neither money nor influence. And for James Roth, Robert Moses would not move the road even a tenth of a mile further. For James Roth, Robert Moses would not move the parkway 1 foot. Robert Moses had offered men of wealth and influence bridges across the parkway so that there would be no interference with their pleasures like hunting and riding. But he wouldn't offer James Roth a bridge so that there would be no interference with his planting. In years to come, James Roth would talk often about the injustice that had been done to him. My father was really rocked by this. He talked about it until the end of his life, says his son Jimmy, who watched his mother and father sweat side by side over their land. And I don't know that I blame him. I'll tell you, my father and mother worked very hard on that place and made something out of it. And then someone just cut it in two. To have someone take away something that you have. The farm never really paid again. There just wasn't enough fertile acreage left. And the Roths found that it took a full 25 minutes to drive their team to the nearest road that crossed the parkway, and then to get back to plow the other side of the farm. Each round trip now took about 50 minutes, and these were 50-minute segments slashed out of the life of a man to whom every minute was necessary. It was quite a ways for a man that was working hard already. The condemnation award never came to much, Mr. Roth says. And because there were two separate, rather small pieces of property instead of a single big one, they couldn't even sell the farm. The situation was the same for other Cold Spring Harbor farmers whose farms were ruined by the Northern State Parkway. To the end of their lives, most of them would remember that fateful day when they had heard the road was coming as a day of tragedy. There was only one aspect of that tragedy that alleviated their bitterness. That was their belief that it was unavoidable, that the thoroughway of the parkway really had been determined by engineering considerations and science, and therefore really could not be changed. 40 years later, when the author asked them about the possibility of the parkway being built through the big estates to the north, none of those farmers thought that such a possibility had ever existed. Blend of the choicest matured Virginia and select Turkish tobaccos, each specially imported by Alfred Dunhill. The Virginia gives a rich flavor and touch of natural sweetness, while the presence of the Turkish leaf imparts a grand aroma. This mixture possesses a soft, mellow flavor, difficult to define but recognized at once by every pipe smoker. Probably best described as nutty. Latakian Oriental tobaccos blended with flue-cured grades from East Carolina and Georgia, lightly toasted in a drying drum. That was written in 1985. A description from the Dunhill Company. Virginia is mild, with a little tart and tangy citrus. Light earth and wood with a fair amount of grass. It forms the base of the blend. The smoky, woody, earthy, mild, sweet Cyprian Latakia is a team player that takes a little of the lead rather than being a dominant force. The woody, dry, floral, herbal, earthy, slightly spicy, Oriental Turkish is ever present in the background. The strength and taste levels are almost medium. The nick hit is just past the center of mild to medium. It won't bite, but you may experience a hint of harsh cigarette if you are a fast puffer. So I recommend moderate puffing cadence. Has a few small rough edges, a well-balanced blend that burns clean at a reasonable pace with a very consistent flavor from start to finish. It reminds me a lot of Gauss Squadron Leader, and the match is really good if you ever want to save some money or if this is unavailable.
Uptown